All right, well, welcome to three of my favorite assistants who I've gotten the opportunity to work with.
Hello.
So this interview is how to get your first job and potentially internship. We'll see if we get to that or not. So I guess probably the best way to start is like we'll just go around the horn. You guys can kind of like introduce yourselves and say like how you got to where you've gotten and why people should listen to you. So why don't we start with Jade?
Oh, okay.
You're like
Um,
on my screen. It seems like a
okay, perfect.
yeah.
I'm Jade. I got to where I am by going to film school. I went to NYU, and made a lot of connections there, and then worked more on the development side at first, and then made my way into working for a showrunner.
Awesome. Zachary?
I'm Zach. I studied at Northeastern and started doing the co-op program out here in LA, working at different production companies like Blumhouse, Illumination, and got advice to start out my career at a talent agency. Made a bunch of connections there, and then went to a production company to work in development, a network to work in current programming, and then eventually made my way over to work in a writer's room on Flash.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I have a little bit of a different path. I did go to film school. I went to USC, but then out of school, I just decided to start making my own crappy short films, web series. And I was just tutoring on the side while I did that. And then on one of those sets that I was directing, that one of the actresses had been like a guest star on Jane the Virgin and become close friends with the second AD. And she came and volunteered on this little set. And she said that, she sometimes works on big sets where they need on-set PAs, extra on-set PAs. And I said, I'd love to do that sometime. Let me know. And I ended up on the set of the Will Smith Netflix movie Bright. And I was supposed to be there for a day, and they hired me for the like 4 to 6 months shoot. And so I worked on that set, which was crazy. And then I ended up kind of being an on-set PA off and on for a year and a half. And I always knew I wanted to write and direct. And I sort of asked all my network of PA friends, like, if you hear of a showrunner's assistant, director's assistant gig, let me know. And from there, I ended up on my first showrunner's assistant. It ended up being showrunner. He was the showrunner and director of all episodes on Amazon's Too Old to Die Young with Nicholas Winding Refn. Worked for him for the whole run of the show and post. And then from there, I went and worked at Marvel on a couple things, WandaVision and Loki as a director's assistant during pre-production. Then I wanted to get back to the writer's room. So I went to blind spotting at Stars. I was their writer's assistant and then got promoted to script coordinator when the series got greenlit. And then I went over to DC's Legends of Tomorrow as script coordinator, and then The Flash as script coordinator, and got my first freelance. That's how I got to here.
Awesome. So, diving into like how you get a job these days. So in my day, which was a long time ago, it was like jobs in the TV writer's office are obviously the hardest to get. So writer's assistant, script coordinator, writer's PA. And like those jobs, I feel like maybe PA, but I feel like those jobs were never posted really on any like boards or anything. It was like a friend, it would always be like a friend reaching out, like such and such show needs a script coordinator or whatever it is. But other jobs, I remember you could go to like tracking board. You could have a subscription to tracking board, which like wasn't super cheap. And there were a couple of their like Twitter handles and stuff. And I feel like eventually those jobs would sort of filter onto the UTA job list, which just seems like something that will never die. But I feel like by the time they would get to the UTA job list, they just like wouldn't be relevant anymore. Like either they wouldn't exist anymore or whatever. But I'm gonna come to you last on this actually, Lauren, because like already being a script coordinator, you're obviously looking for a little bit different types of gigs. So Zach, like, how do you, I guess, go about looking for jobs right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, the main thing is word of mouth is going to be how you get stuff when it's fresh and when the companies or shows are still looking for people. Because by the time it gets to job boards, 9 times out of 10, those hiring managers' inboxes are already flooded with resumes and they're not taking anymore. So having started off my career at a talent agency and having made those connections with, assistants at the time who maybe they've progressed now and are agents, or they're still assistants or coordinators, they are kind of at the hub of who needs to be hired in what spots, whether that's at management companies or agencies. Staying in touch with those people has been really useful for me, because they have information first and foremost. And if you do a good job of making friends and just staying in contact with them, they're always trying to look out for people, even for their own selfish interest. So that's been most useful for me.
Anything to add to that, Jade?
Yeah, I think definitely of this whole business is who you know. And even if, I mean, you can sometimes get a job from like a tracking board or like a Discord group or Facebook group. But your resume is going to be at the top of the list if you were sent by like a mutual or like you already knew that assistant or that sort of thing. So networking is always like the most important thing to do when you're job hunting.
What are some of those groups called? Like you said, I'm gonna be so old right now. You said there was a Slack group. That's what you said,
A
right?
Discord group,
A
yeah.
Discord group.
It's sort of like Slack. It's very similar. Yeah, I'm part of one that's like New Hollywood Association. There's probably a bunch of different ones. But it's just, and to get onto those, you also have to know someone that's
Right,
on them. So yeah.
right. And then Lauren, if someone, you know, takes my course and is like, I'm gonna go try to get a script coordinator jobs. How do they go about trying to get a script coordinator job?
I mean, I think what I'll contribute, yeah, I totally agree with what everyone
Oh
said.
yeah,
What I'll
contribute
contribute
anything, whatever you
is
want to say that's helpful.
like the awesome assistants, like there's, I mean, so there's awesome assistants. You're probably not going to see a script coordinator post in there. That's a Facebook group. But there's like subgroups. There's awesome assistants, like writers room support staff. And the problem is you can only get in that room if you've already been a support staff. So, but if you can get in there, if you've been a writer's PA or a showrunner's assistant, then you can qualify to get in there. And you'll see sometimes that's actually where I found my script coordinator job on Legends. But what I'll say is the jobs, it's like really hard if there's a post there and you submit, to an email that's listed. It is hard to get an interview off of that, because what you should do, what I did when I saw the Legends job, was I knew somebody who worked on Legends from just like taking a writing class in LA. And so I saw the post, I applied, but I reached out to my friend and I said, "Hey Leah, like I saw this Legend, I think it's for Legends. Like, is it? I would love to get an interview. Like, if you could maybe flag me." And she did flag me, and that's how I got an interview, because I heard there were 400 submissions. They only had it open for a day for the one job. So it's very hard to get looked at without, so try to leverage, if you see a job posting somewhere, try to go, oh, what is it, try to figure out what it's for. If they say, don't say. And then try to figure out if you know anybody who knows anybody who's connected to it, because that's the only way that you're really going to rise to the top of the pile have your resume looked at to be considered for an interview.
Yeah, and by the way, like even now as a writer, I still have to do that.
Oh yeah, no, I'm
My
still
agents
doing
are
the
like,
same
"Oh, we
thing.
submitted you for the rookie," and I have like my email that I send to people. I'm like, "Oh, I see you worked with him on such and such show. Do you have the type of relationship where you'd be willing to like, are you guys close enough friends where you'd be willing to drop my name?" Yeah, because like there's so many submissions, you're not gonna get. Um, yeah, and like something I would do in my assistant days is like, because on the script coordinators Google group, sometimes script coordinator jobs would get posted. And I'd get the email blast and I would just have my resume sitting in like a Gmail draft so that like if I were on the road, I could just pull over, send off my resume to whatever. But like yeah, and those jobs, it was like, say it wasn't like Law and Order, but say it was Law and Order, there'd be like a dummy like Law and Order resumes or whatever. Someone created a Gmail address just to collect resumes, and in like an hour, they'd be like, "We have enough resumes," and then the Gmail address would just be like deleted. Like it would happen that's why you'd have to have the resume just like in your draft or whatever to happen that quickly.
It's still like that, so that's really smart advice, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And something you guys touched on was like word of mouth and connections and all that stuff. And I think that does kind of lead into something I always preach to assistants and stuff is like it's not a job, it's an audition. You really are auditioning for the people you're working for. Because like, not that you guys are like auditioning for me, that sounds gross. But like, if I didn't think highly of you when we were working together, I wouldn't have asked you to come on, to be interviewed like for this situation. So it really is like, yeah, because no one's gonna call you to recommend you for a job if they didn't think much of your performance when you were working with them. Um,
Yeah, I think some of the best advice I got, like when I was in college and trying to figure out like how to get a job, like they were mostly like, yeah, your experience like really important, but a lot of these jobs you're just working like 12 hours and you just want someone you can tolerate for that long or like can chill and hang with. And it's like, okay, if you put it in that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Like you just need to be a good person to work with.
right. And if you're approaching the job, I mean, at any level, but especially at the PA level, if you're approaching it like this sucks and I just have to get through it until I can do a better job, like
Yeah.
no one likes that.
Yeah.
Because like we're talking about, there's hundreds of people who want that job, and no one's gonna appreciate if your attitude is like, I'm just gonna grin and bear it.
Yeah,
Um,
doing a good job with whatever job that you currently have is a really big thing. Whether you're starting off an adjacent position and you're trying to get somewhere else, making sure that you do the best job you can there, because then the people you're working with and surrounding you with can recognize the value you bring to that position and will then help you get where you actually want to get. And then, if you do end up as like a writer's PA or a showrunner's assistant or something along those lines, and you do a good enough job at that level, well, now you've impressed a plethora of writers that are going to go off and do their own things, and who knows what shows they're going to get staffed on, which will need people to come along with. And so that's kind of the biggest thing, is like that's how you build a network, is by doing good enough work that everybody wants to have you on their team.
right, and you have to put yourself in the position that when an opportunity does present itself, someone like you went from showrunner's assistant to writer's assistant very quickly because you'd put yourself in the position to, be someone who our boss wanted to make a writer's assistant once that need became available. So
Yeah,
kudos.
yeah, exactly. Like that was, an opportunity that presented itself like kind of by chance, but it doesn't happen if I'm doing a terrible job as a showrunner's assistant. So
Right,
you never know what can happen. Like you can't expect that always, but put yourself in the position where that can happen if you get lucky.
right. And you guys all did internships, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember, Jade, how you got your internship?
Um, Similar way to getting a job. I feel like I would see it posted on like NYU had a posting for internships and but the ones that I ended up getting was I knew someone who had that one before.
Mm,
Especially in the beginning because like a lot of it was like really hard to actually land one until you knew someone that had that one before because you didn't have that previous experience kind of thing. Um, but yeah, that was how I got them.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely for your first one, like don't you need to just ask all of your friends who are in town or ask your friends at your college or whatever because my first one, yeah, I ended up my older brother had worked at a company, like an adjacent company and was able to like reach out and that's the only way because you have no experience.
mm.
After the first one's the hardest and then after you have one, like then I was able to get internships easily through USC had a portal and I could apply and um but the first one you need to use your network.
Yeah. The hope is obviously like Lawrence explaining that things snowball on each other once you get the ball rolling. And yeah, so for me, my first internship was with WWE because my dad had a connection there, World Wrestling Entertainment. And then uh, WWE had a deal with Blumhouse Productions because they were doing movies together. So then I popped over to Blumhouse for an internship. And then I got an internship with Conan just by applying online. But I already had things on my resume that showed I was qualified for it. And then one of my fraternity brothers had a connection to Illumination Entertainment. So I applied there. And yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's word of mouth. Developing your resume so that you're qualified for positions and then like keeping track of like what connections different people have.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I've heard it's a lot harder to get an internship now than it used to be. Like, again, my day was a very long time ago, but like in my day, it was like if you were willing to go work for someone for free, they were like, sure, like, yeah. Like I interviewed for 2 internships and I got both of them, and I've interviewed for tons of jobs that I didn't get. So,
Mm.
um, do you guys have any like resume tip, anything that you've noticed like in formatting your resume or anything like that that like, I don't know, has made your resume pop, or anything anyone has mentioned? Like people would always bring up with my resume that I was a bartender. I don't know, they thought that was like interesting. I guess that was more so when I didn't have very many like industry credits to put on my resume. But I don't know, anything that you guys have noticed that like works well in terms of your resume?
Well, I mean, that's a good point in itself. If your resume is lacking from industry experience or maybe the position that you're going for, try to really lean into whatever separates you and gives you a unique perspective. Um, because a lot of times the people that are interviewing talk to the same kinds of people over and over. And so if there's something that stands out, they might just want to interview because you have something different to bring to the table. For me, like something I do on the side is working on the suicide hotline. And so having that on the resume, people bring that up constantly, or people bring up the fact I worked at World Wrestling Entertainment because like that's such a kind of crazy industry to be part of. And like, um, so having something on there is not something necessarily to shy away from. That said, once you get to a certain level, it does become a lot about just making sure the most relevant experience is always at the top and easy to see.
I agree with that for sure. I remember when I was earlier in my career, I had before I'd sort of gotten into onset PAing, I'd worked on an online blog, and I had on my resume about like writing for this online blog, and I'd ended up needing to choose a pseudonym. It was for this like SAT ACT tutoring website, and it was like how to get into college advice, and I wrote this article about how to get into film school, and I was getting bombarded by people stalking me online and like trying to ask for free advice on their film applications. So I did get a few paying clients off that, but I ended up getting so bombarded I had to go by a pseudonym and get them to like remove my actual name from the website. But anyway, I put that on my resume, and that got brought up in like my Marvel interview. They just thought it was funny that I was like, you'll be amazed on how kids will stalk you online, like my pseudonym. So yeah, don't be afraid of the fun fact. But once you get to a certain level, you don't really need the fun fact.
Anything to add to that, Jade, or do you think that they cover
Yeah. No,
resumes?
I completely agree. I feel like, yeah, even I would just put like interests and people would be like, you like to aerial dance? That's random. Or just like having, I think, fun facts is like, it helps them see you as more of a full human than just like what is on your resume. And I would also say, like, from the perspective, like when I was working at a development job and hiring interns, like just having like a very well formatted resume that looks professional can go a long way too. I know it's like a more chill industry and you can get jobs without like the fanciest resume, but I think like if I don't know you and it's between like a kind of messy resume and like a well put together one, like normally it will reach out to the more put together one.
Right. Yeah, I was a showrunner's assistant for 4 years, and I was always tasked, myself and the other showrunner's assistant were tasked with like hiring the PAs.
Mm.
And yeah, sort of like the first cut would be, if someone submitted their resume as a Microsoft Word document, like as a manipulatable
Oh,
document, it was like,
yeah.
that's just, yeah, you should always submit as a PDF. Don't like send your resume out there in a way someone can manipulate it. And then sort of cut number two, because I feel like you interview so many people and they're all pretty good. And it's kind of hard to like, I feel like cut number two was always anybody who doesn't send a thank you email for the interview.
Hmm.
That was like the easiest cut for us because it was like, thank
Totally.
you for narrowing down the field by not thanking us for the interview. So always thank people when they take the time to like interview you. Um, by the way, if anyone's like watching this and I keep like looking over, I'm not disinterested. It's because my interview questions are on my like screen over there. When I was like watching back my last interview, I'm like, I totally look like I'm not listening, but it's just that I'm looking at the interview questions. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you like, I don't know, majorly like screwed something up? And I guess like how did you handle that? If you're willing to divulge. I certainly have been in this situation. It happens a lot as a script coordinator because the stakes are so high and there's just like 1,000 things you can screw up. But I don't know, have you guys in the other jobs like been in these situations, and how did you handle it?
I'll
Yeah.
I'll Sorry. I'll go first as yeah, my first script coordinator job, I made a big oops, which was and I think it was our season finale. The showrunner really wanted the end to be a secret. I don't think it was really necessary, but whatever. Um, and but he needed certain people to get the secret copy and certain people to get it with actually the real ending, whatever, redacted, non-redacted. So anyway, so I messed up who I sent whichever to at, he wanted to release it at certain times, whatever. So I messed it up. And I just, I owned up to it. You just definitely own up to your mistake and apologize. Just say, like, I'm so sorry. This is what happened. I did the wrong thing. I'm so sorry. Like, this will never happen again. And what can I do? Is there anything I can do? I can send, emails out, trying to ask people to delete it or whatever. Do the best you can to offer a solution, or ask what you can do to offer a solution, and just, really commit to trying never to make that mistake again, I think is just the best you can do. I mean, obviously you can't undo what's been done, but the worst thing you can do is not own up to it, not take responsibility. I would not recommend trying to let it like skirt under the rug. That's not my MO. I think you need to just, once you realize a mistake has been made, you own up to it, you take responsibility, and people will respect you for that.
Yeah. My big mess up wasn't it ended up not being as big of a thing as I thought it was initially. I panicked when it first happened though. And it was when I was working as the showrunner's assistant. And uh basically we were doing some stuff where we were figuring out who was going to be in charge of our VFX and post-production stuff. And so at the end of this email chain, they asked about setting up a call with this person. And I hadn't gone through and read what they had been discussing previously on the thread. I had just seen on the last email, like, hey, let's set up an email with a call with this person. And so I did a forward and then included everybody in it to set up this call. And then I realized that in this email thread, they were talking about like firing this person. And I was like, oh my God, like, oh my God. Uh, and so I immediately called and I was like, hey, this is the deal. I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't read carefully. This is a huge mistake. Let me know if there's anything I can do, blah, blah. And he's like, slow down. Like, let me go read the emails. Like, it'll be okay. He went and checked out the emails, and apparently the person I looped in that we were setting up the call with wasn't the person getting fired or anything like that. That was like a hiring manager that like they were going to be discussing the situation with. And so it wasn't a big deal. But he's like, lesson learned here. Always start a new email thread. Don't like, forward it based off something else. And yeah, it was just he was very generous with me with that. Obviously there wasn't a big mistake in the moment, but owning up to it is a big thing, as Lauren said. 9 times out of 10, mistakes are going to come to light. There's only so much you can do to cover that stuff up. And if you get caught trying to cover something up, huge issue. And so, yeah, just being aware and then also moving forward, making sure you don't repeat the same kind of mistakes, because mistakes can happen once. That's okay. That's fine. That's innocent. But if it becomes a pattern, then people aren't going to trust you to do the sort of work that they need you to.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like definitely some jobs like the levels of mistakes too is like a thing, but I definitely had a mess up when I was working at Universal. And it was ultimately minor, but like was major in the moment. And I think owning up to it, like everyone's saying, and I think also like a good way to help yourself prevent mistakes in general, from what I've learned from being an assistant, is just like over communicating. Like I feel like the biggest mistakes I always like ever make as an assistant would be like because I assumed something was happening or they knew something. Like assumption is your enemy. So just like you're not being annoying, like do ask, especially if you really need that clarity, I think is huge.
Yeah, I think everything you guys said is very wise, especially the owning up to a part and what you said, Jade, about like clarity and like just like be redundant and just like it's better to be redundant and annoying than to make a mistake. Like I wound up training several of the script coordinators in the Arrowverse building because like pre-pandemic we were all just like very physically close to each other. And anytime it's a new script coordinator, they're gonna come to you with just tons of questions because like until you get the hang of it, you just have a ton of questions. And I would always tell them like, you're gonna feel like you're annoying me, just continue to annoy me because it's better to like annoy me than to like screw up something for your show and have your showrunner like irritated with you. So yeah, just like be annoying if you have to. That's way better than like screwing something up major.
And annoying to the
Or
right people. I feel like that's important. Like, don't
right.
annoy the head person. Like,
Yes.
are
Yeah.
there barriers you can reach first and then annoy
Yeah,
them?
like go annoy the staff writer on Flash. That's way better than like screwing
Yeah.
up something and like having your showrunner be pissed at you. Yeah.
Take the time to be stupid at the start of a job. Like
Yeah.
that's the time where you should ask questions like constantly and get the clarity. Like, you know, if you're too scared about asking them then, and then you start asking them like months into it, people are gonna be like, why is this coming up now? Like, you know, you had the chance to get clarity on this. It's like, have you been screwing it up this whole time? Like at the start of the job, ask a lot of questions, get comfortable with that.
Right.
I will say one other thing just that we haven't spoken about because so the job that I made my big mistake on was a first season show. And when you're on a first season show and you're a script coordinator, you don't have someone to turn to and say, what was the protocol? So I would say definitely like lean on your network when you're in a first season situation and you don't have a predecessor to go to, because like as a script coordinator, you're a position of one. There's no one you can turn to other than previous script coordinator to ask questions. So like turn to those Facebook groups, those like Google groups, ask the questions there, try to like convince someone to sit down and have coffee with you. Obviously you have access to this awesome network and these videos that will answer, 99% of your questions, but sometimes there's that 1% question that's just so niche and buried that you're not going to find it. Like I read that script coordinator book for that first job and I still made hella mistakes because I didn't sit down with anybody because I made the mistake of thinking the book taught me everything, and it did not. There were things that I wasn't sure about, and I didn't have anybody to turn to for questions, but I should have tried to make script coordinator friends to like reach out to. So if you don't have a previous person to ask from the show.
Yes. So the only other question I have is like, is there any specific advice or anything you guys have received? But I feel like we covered that. Do you guys feel like there's anything else that you wanted to sort of like, if you were advising the young hopefuls that we didn't say?
One tiny thing, don't be afraid. Like when you are looking for a job, like tell the people you know, because I think that's honestly a barrier sometimes to getting a job is like people don't know you're looking. And when I wanted to get into a writer's room, like I put it out to my network. I was like, I'm looking for a writer's PA, showrunner's assistant, writer's assistant, any job, I'll do anything on any genre. Like I just want a job. And that's really what helped me get my foot in the door. And even now it's like I sometimes have to be like, I'm still open to script coordinator jobs. If you hear of any, like, please let me know. Jade sent me a job listing. Sometimes you just need to let people know and then they'll be on the lookout for you.
Awesome.
It's also to that point too. It's also good to look out for other people too, because like reciprocity and all that. So I also have fun. Like it's great when you're like, wait, this would be so great for someone else. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Good karma.
Good karma. Yeah, and like if you do get a job, just like we've talked about this, but like come in with the right attitude.
Mhm.
Because like me having come up, I spent almost 10 years as an assistant, and writers who came up through the assistant ranks, like you can tell you guys will be able like right away almost if a person has the right attitude. And like it's not magic, it's simple stuff. Like not on Flash, but on a different show I worked on. The showrunner had sent the PA to like Amoeba Records or whatever to like get this DVD. And then he came back and he didn't say anything. And then the showrunner the next time saw him was like, "Oh, did you get that DVD?" And the kid was just like, "Oh, I didn't have it." And then he just went back to working whatever he was working on. It's like that is not that everything you just did is wrong. Like none of that so we're not talking about like this is not quantum physics here. Just like have a can-do attitude and like all you had to come back and say they don't have it. Do you want me to go try to find it somewhere else? Like
Yeah,
Or just
especially
take the initiative and go somewhere else on your way back to see if they
right.
have it. Yeah.
especially when you're like yeah, lower on the ranks. Like when I was an intern at Martin Scorsese's company, like they tasked all the interns with finding this one like post-it note holder that was a specific dimension that they no longer carry. And I basically like won the intern Olympics by finding it. Like I literally spent $100 shipping it from Amazon UK, but like it's the exact one Martin Scorsese wanted, so he must have it. So like sometimes you'll have really stupid tasks, but like I think that's like when you do complete them, there's definitely like a good reward for that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, Lauren, you were talking about how for some positions you have 400 submissions going, like there, and especially in today's day and age, so many people are going for these kinds of jobs. Um, so anything you can do to just go an extra step to stand out, like you need a way to separate yourself from the pack of people that are also doing the same job. If you're content just like skating by and doing bare minimum or even below that, like that you're not going to sustain a career and certainly not advance. There's just too much competition out there.
I think that is an excellent way to end, unless you guys have something else to add to that.
Mhm. Sounds good.
This was
Yeah.
fun. Thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you having on.